The great hall of Nexus Prime Station buzzed with nervous energy. Representatives from dozens of alien species filled the circular chamber, their varied forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes. At the center sat the human delegation, looking small and plain compared to their exotic neighbors. Kang Wu adjusted his simple gray uniform and looked around the room. To his left, the Zilani ambassador Thrix sparkled like a living diamond, light dancing across its crystalline surface. To his right, the massive Gorlan delegate breathed heavily through 3 nostril slits, its rocky skin groaning with each movement. But all eyes were on the Vorthak delegation at the far end of the chamber. Commander Hyun stood nearly 8 feet tall, his black chitinous armor gleaming under the station's lights. 6 arms ended in razor-sharp claws, and his triangular head held 4 glowing red eyes that missed nothing. Behind him stood 5 more Vorthak warriors, each one a living weapon. The chamber fell silent as Hyun began to speak. His voice came through the translation system as a cold, mechanical tone. The Galactic Council recognizes the Vorthak Empire's claim to the Kepler 442 system and Proxima Centauri b, Hyun announced. These worlds contain resources vital to our expansion. The primitive humans currently occupying these planets have 72 standard hours to evacuate all personnel and equipment. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Several alien delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The Vorthak had conquered 17 species in the past century, and everyone knew what happened to those who refused their demands. Thrix's crystalline form pulsed with worried light. Commander Hyun, perhaps we could negotiate a peaceful solution? The humans have invested considerable resources in those colonies. Hyun's mandibles clicked with what the translator interpreted as laughter. The Vorthak Empire does not negotiate with primitives. We take what we need. Those who resist are eliminated. Kang Wu had remained silent throughout the proceedings, but now he slowly stood up. At 55 years old, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a career diplomat. His weathered face showed no fear as he looked directly at the towering Vorthak commander. Commander Hyun, Kang Wu said calmly, I think there's something you should know about humans before you make any final decisions. Speak quickly. Primitive, Hyun replied, his red eyes focusing on the small human. Your time grows short. Kang Wu clasped his hands behind his back and began walking slowly around the chamber's center circle. Every alien eye followed him, sensing that something important was about to happen. My grandfather's name was Dongmin, Kang Wu began. He fought in a war on Earth many decades ago. The enemy had better weapons, more soldiers, and controlled most of the battlefield. They surrounded my grandfather's unit in a frozen valley and demanded surrender. The chamber was completely silent now. Even Hyun's warriors had stopped their restless movement. The enemy commander was confident, Kang Wu continued. He had every reason to be. My grandfather's men were outnumbered 10 to 1. They were low on ammunition, food, and medical supplies. Many were wounded. It was winter, and they had no proper shelter. Kang Wu stopped walking and faced Hyun directly. Do you know what my grandfather told that enemy commander? I do not care about the stories of dead primitives, Hyun replied. But his voice had lost some of its certainty. My grandfather said, You can kill us, but you cannot make us quit. Kang Wu's voice remained calm, but something in his tone made several aliens lean forward in their seats. Those men held that valley for 2 weeks against impossible odds. They fought with broken weapons, empty stomachs, and frozen hands. When they finally died, they were still fighting. Ambassador Thrix pulsed with nervous light. Surely, Representative Kang Wu, that was an exceptional case. Kang Wu smiled slightly. That's the thing about humans, Ambassador Thrix. We're all exceptional cases when someone tries to make us quit. He turned back to Hyun. Commander, I've studied your species' military history. You're very good at breaking armies and conquering worlds. Your weapons are superior to ours. Your ships are faster and stronger. Your soldiers are bigger and more dangerous. Hyun's chest swelled with pride. Finally, the primitive shows wisdom. But, Kang Wu continued, there's one thing your military analysts might have missed in their reports about humanity. And what is that? We don't break. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Several alien delegates exchanged worried glances. They had seen what happened when the Vorthak encountered resistance before. It never ended well for the resistors. Hyun's mandibles clicked again, but this time the sound seemed less confident. Every species believes they are strong until they face Vorthak steel. "Oh, I'm sure you'll make us bleed," Kang Wu replied easily. "You'll destroy our ships, kill our soldiers, maybe even bomb our worlds. But here's what you won't do. You won't make us surrender. You won't make us quit. And you certainly won't make us run away with our tails between our legs." The human delegate walked closer to the Vorthak delegation. The warriors tensed, but Hyun held up one clawed hand to stop them. "Let me tell you what will happen if you attack our colonies," Kang Wu said. "Every human you face will fight like their life depends on it, because it does. Every ship you destroy will take one of yours with it. Every soldier you kill will make 10 more humans angry enough to volunteer for the military." His voice grew harder. "You'll win battles, Commander, but you'll lose the war. Because while you're fighting to expand your empire, we'll be fighting for our homes, our families, and our right to exist as free beings." The chamber erupted in nervous chatter. The Gorlan delegate's rocky skin rumbled with what might have been approval. The insectoid Creely clicked their mandibles rapidly in their species' version of excitement. Hyun raised himself to his full height, trying to intimidate the much smaller human. "Your words are brave, primitive. But words do not stop plasma cannons or boarding parties." "No," Kang Wu agreed. "But determination does something that all your superior weapons cannot do. It makes ordinary people into heroes. It turns miners into warriors and farmers into soldiers. It takes a peaceful species and transforms them into something you've never faced before." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Commander Hyun, you've conquered 17 species. But you've never faced humans before. We're different. We're the species that looked at fire and decided to capture it. We're the ones who saw the ocean and built boats to cross it. We looked up at the stars and found a way to reach them." Kang Wu's smile was cold as winter. "And we're the species that has never, in our entire history, learned how to quit." The Vorthak commander stared down at the human for a long moment. Around them, the chamber had fallen completely silent again. 72 hours, Hyun finally said. "Evacuate your colonies or face the consequences." Kang Wu nodded politely. "Thank you for the warning, Commander. I'll make sure to pass along your message." As the aliens began filing out of the chamber, Thrix approached the human delegation. Representative Kang Wu, the crystalline being, said softly, "Are you certain your people understand what they're facing?" Kang Wu gathered his papers and prepared to leave. "Ambassador Thrix, I don't think the Vorthak understand what they're facing." He walked toward the exit, leaving behind a chamber full of worried aliens and one very thoughtful Vorthak commander. 3 days after the meeting at Nexus Prime, the Vorthak First Fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system. Commander Hyun stood on the bridge of his flagship, the massive dreadnought Death's Edge, and watched the tactical display with satisfaction. "Report," he ordered his tactical officer. "Sir, we detect 12 human vessels in defensive formation around the 4th planet," the officer replied. 11 appear to be civilian craft, mining ships and cargo haulers. 1 military vessel, classification unknown. Hyun's mandibles clicked with amusement. "This is their grand resistance?" "A handful of merchant ships and 1 warship." On the human side, Captain Sora stood on the bridge of the Earth Navy destroyer Soul's Pride, watching the massive Vorthak fleet approach. Her ship was 15 years old, barely half the size of the smallest Vorthak cruiser, and armed with weapons that were outdated even when they were new. "Captain," called Ensign Jin Ho from the communication station, "I'm getting calls from the civilian ships. They want to know what the plan is." Sora looked at the tactical display. 43 Vorthak warships, including 6 heavy cruisers and that monster of a flagship. Her own force consisted of her destroyer and 11 civilian vessels whose crews had refused to evacuate when the warning came. "Tell them the plan is simple," she said calmly. "We hold this world." "Ma'am," Lieutenant Yujin said from the weapons station, "even if we combine all our firepower, we can't match even one of their cruisers." Sora nodded. "You're right. We can't outshoot them, we can't outrun them, and we definitely can't outnumber them." She smiled grimly. "So we'll have to outfight them." She opened a channel to all the civilian ships. "This is Captain Sora to all vessels. I know you're scared. I know this looks impossible. But remember why you're here. This isn't just about keeping a planet. It's about proving that humans don't back down when bullies come calling." The reply came from Captain Dongwu of the mining ship Busan's Hope. "We're with you. Captain, tell us what you need." Meanwhile, on the Vorthak flagship, Hyun was growing impatient. Open a channel to the human vessels, he ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing Captain Sora on her small bridge. Hyun had to admit the human looked calm for someone about to die. Human Captain, Hyun said, you have one chance to surrender. Abandon your ships and we will allow you to evacuate to the planet's surface. Sora looked directly into the camera. Commander Hyun, I've got a counteroffer for you. Turn your ships around and leave our system, and we won't have to embarrass you in front of your crew. The Vorthak bridge fell silent. No one had ever spoken to their commander like that before. Hyun's red eyes blazed with anger. You dare mock the Vorthak Empire? Destroy them. All of them. The first wave of Vorthak fighters screamed toward the human formation. Sora watched them come and made her decision. All civilian ships execute Plan Crazy, she ordered. The mining ships suddenly broke formation and accelerated straight at the Vorthak fleet. Hyun watched in confusion as the primitive vessels ignored his fighters and headed directly for his capital ships. Sir, his tactical officer reported, the human mining ships are on collision courses with our cruisers. They're not trying to fight, they're trying to ram us. Impossible, Hyun snarled. No species is that insane. But the humans were exactly that determined. The first mining ship, New Seoul, crashed into the side of a Vorthak heavy cruiser at full speed. The ship's fusion reactor went critical on impact, tearing a massive hole in the alien warship's hull. Before the Vorthak could react, 2 more mining ships slammed into another cruiser. These ships had been loaded with mining explosives, and the combined detonation cracked the alien vessel in half. They're using their own ships as weapons, the tactical officer reported in shock. Captain Sora watched the sacrifices of the civilian crews and felt a cold rage building in her chest. Her people were dying to buy her time, and she wasn't going to waste it. Yujin, target that destroyer on our starboard side, she ordered. Jinho, give me shipwide communications. She keyed the microphone. All hands, this is the captain. The mining crews have shown us how humans fight when the odds are impossible. Now it's our turn. We're going to hold this line for as long as we can, and we're going to make them pay for every meter. The Soul's Pride opened fire with everything she had. Her missiles might be old, but they were guided by human determination and crew members who refused to miss. The battle became a nightmare for the Vorthak. Every time they destroyed a human ship, another one appeared to take its place. The cargo haulers had been rigged with remote controls, allowing skeleton crews to ram them into Vorthak vessels before escaping in life pods. For 6 hours, Captain Sora and her destroyer held the center of the line. Her ship was burning in a dozen places. Half her crew was dead or wounded, and her weapons were running low on ammunition. But she kept fighting. Captain Chief Boram called from engineering. We've lost main power. Engines are down and we're venting atmosphere on decks 3 and 4. How long until they board us? Sora asked. 10 minutes, maybe less, Yujin replied. Sora nodded and opened the emergency communication channel that would broadcast to every human ship in the system, every colonial settlement, and every Earth Navy vessel within 50 light-years. This is Captain Sora of the Earth Navy destroyer Soul's Pride, she said calmly. We have held Kepler 442 for 18 hours against a Vorthak fleet 40 times our size. My ship is dying, half my crew is dead, and we're about to be boarded. She paused as explosions rocked the ship. But we held 12 ships, 11 civilian volunteers, and 1 old destroyer, and we held for 18 hours against the mighty Vorthak Empire. Her voice hardened. I want every human who hears this message to remember what happened here today. We didn't run. We didn't surrender. We stood our ground and made them pay. The transmission cut as Vorthak boarding pods slammed into the hull. Commander Hyun himself led the boarding party onto the human destroyer. He expected to find a defeated crew ready to surrender. Instead, he found Captain Sora and her remaining crew members, Lieutenant Yujin and Chief Boram, waiting for them in the main corridor. They had no armor, limited ammunition, and improvised weapons. But they fought like humans had always fought when cornered, with intelligence, fury, and absolute refusal to quit. The battle for the ship took 3 hours. The humans used their knowledge of their own vessel against the boarders, leading them into traps and ambushes. They fought from room to room, deck by deck, making the Vorthak pay for every step. When it finally ended, Hyun stood over the bodies of the 3 human officers. They had died fighting to the last breath, taking 12 Vorthak warriors with them. Sir, one of his surviving warriors said, I have never seen anything like this. They knew they could not win, yet they never stopped fighting. Heian looked around the destroyed bridge of the human destroyer. 18 hours. A single old warship and some mining vessels had held off his entire fleet for 18 hours. "Get me a communication link to Vorthak High Command," he ordered. "Tell them we need reinforcements, sir?" His warrior asked. "We have conquered the system." Heian looked at the tactical display showing the wreckage of both fleets scattered across space. He had started the battle with 43 ships. He now had 27 vessels still capable of fighting, and most of those were damaged. The humans had started with 12 ships. They now had 0, and somehow Heian felt like he had lost. "Send the message," he repeated. "Tell High Command that humans are not like other species. Tell them." He paused, remembering the human diplomat's words. "Tell them that humans may bleed, but they do not break." As news of the battle spread across human space, Captain Sora's final transmission was played on every communication channel. Her words became a rallying cry that echoed from Earth to the farthest human colonies. The Vorthak had won their first battle against humanity. They would soon discover it was the last easy victory they would ever achieve. The news of Kepler 442 reached Earth exactly 36 hours after Captain Sora's final transmission. Admiral Tae-hyun stood in the center of the Global Defense Council's war room, watching the holographic display that showed the battle's aftermath. Around him, the finest military minds of Earth studied the tactical data with grim determination. "How many?" asked General Mi-young, her voice tight with controlled anger. "All of them," Admiral Tae-hyun replied quietly. Captain Sora, her crew, and every civilian volunteer. They held for 18 hours against 43 Vorthak warships. Colonel Seung-ho leaned forward in his chair. "What did we learn from their sacrifice?" Dr. Hee-jin, Earth's leading expert on alien biology, activated a new display showing detailed scans of Vorthak ships and soldiers. Captain Sora's crew managed to transmit complete tactical data before their ship was destroyed. "We now know their weapon signatures, shield frequencies, and armor composition. More importantly," added Fleet Commander Yoon-soo, "we know they can be hurt." Sora's people destroyed or damaged 16 Vorthak vessels before they went down. Admiral Tae-hyun nodded. "The question is, what do we do with that information?" Engineer Wan-il stood up from his workstation. "Admiral, I've been analyzing the battle data with my team. The Vorthak have superior firepower and armor, but they have 2 critical weaknesses." "Explain," the Admiral ordered. "First, their ships are designed for overwhelming attacks against weaker opponents. They're not built for prolonged combat against determined resistance. Second, they don't understand human tactics because they've never faced an enemy that uses suicide attacks as standard strategy." General Mi-young smiled coldly. "Then we give them a real education in human warfare." 3 weeks later, the second human expeditionary fleet prepared to launch from Earth's orbital shipyards. Vice Admiral Byung-soo stood on the bridge of the new flagship Incheon's Fury, watching his fleet assemble around him. The fleet was unlike anything humanity had ever built before. Working around the clock, Earth's shipyards had produced 12 new destroyers, 6 heavy cruisers, and 2 experimental carriers. More importantly, every ship had been designed with the lessons learned from Kepler 442. "Admiral," called Captain Nari from the communications station, "all ships report ready for departure." Byung-soo looked at the tactical display showing his 37 warships. It was the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled, but he knew it was still smaller than what the Vorthak could bring to bear. "Very well," he said. "Signal all ships. We're going to show the Vorthak what happens when you make humans angry." The fleet jumped to hyperspace, heading for the Tau Ceti system where Vorthak forces were massing for their next attack on human space. Meanwhile, in the fighter bays of the carrier New Busan, Commander Nari briefed her pilots. The fighter squadron consisted of volunteers who had requested transfer after hearing about Kepler 442. Each pilot wore a small patch on their uniform, showing Captain Sora's ship. "Listen up," Nari said to the assembled pilots. "The Vorthak think they understand human tactics now. They think we're going to ram our ships into them again. They're wrong." Lieutenant Dongwu raised his hand. "Ma'am, what's the real plan?" Nari smiled. "We're going to be unpredictable. The Vorthak are used to fighting species that follow standard military doctrine, but humans don't have standard military doctrine. We have whatever works." She activated a hologram showing Vorthak ship designs. "Their fighters are faster and more heavily armed than ours. But they fly in rigid formations because that's how their military culture works. Our job is to break those formations and create chaos. When the human fleet arrived at Tau Ceti, they found exactly what they expected. A Vorthak battle group of 52 ships waiting in defensive formation around the system's main planet. Commander Hyun, now promoted after his victory at Kepler 442, watched the human ships approach and felt confident. These humans had more ships than the last group, but they were still outnumbered and outgunned. "Open fire when they come into range," he ordered. "Show them what happens to species that resist the Empire." But the humans didn't behave as expected. Instead of forming a battle line or attempting a massed attack, the human fleet split into 7 smaller groups and approached from different angles. "Sir," reported the Vorthak tactical officer, "the humans are not following standard attack patterns. Their movements appear random," Hyun frowned. "Maintain formation. They cannot harm us with this scattered approach." He was wrong. The first human group, led by Captain Yong-Su and the destroyer Busan's Hammer, attacked the Vorthak left flank with conventional weapons. While the Vorthak focused on repelling this attack, Commander Nari's fighters swept in from behind and launched a devastating strike on their command ships. "Impossible," Hyun snarled as his tactical display showed chaos spreading through his formation. "How did their fighters penetrate our screens?" The answer was simple. They hadn't tried to penetrate anything. Instead, the human pilots had used their ship's superior maneuverability to slip between the gaps in Vorthak formations, attacking weak points that the aliens had never thought to defend. Lieutenant Dongwu led his squadron in a spiraling attack pattern that confused the Vorthak targeting computers. While the alien gunners tried to track the wildly maneuvering human fighters, Dongwu's wingmen slipped in close and delivered precise strikes to engine compartments and weapon systems. Their tactics make no sense. The Vorthak tactical officer reported, "They are attacking randomly without coordination." But there was coordination. It just wasn't the kind the Vorthak understood. Each human captain was given broad objectives and allowed to achieve them however they thought best. This created an unpredictable battle where no 2 human attacks were alike. Captain Yong-Su demonstrated this perfectly when his destroyer was surrounded by 3 Vorthak cruisers. Instead of trying to fight his way out, he ordered his ship to ram the largest enemy vessel at full speed. But just before impact, he ejected his crew in escape pods and detonated his ship's reactor. The explosion destroyed the Vorthak cruiser and damaged the 2 others. Yong-Su's crew was picked up by another human ship 20 minutes later, ready to continue the fight. "They are insane," Hyun's communications officer reported. "They destroyed their own ship just to damage ours." "No," Hyun said slowly, beginning to understand what he was facing. "They are not insane. They are something worse. They are willing to sacrifice everything to win." The battle raged for 8 hours. By the end, the Vorthak had lost 31 ships while the humans had lost 19. More importantly, the surviving Vorthak vessels were badly damaged and low on ammunition, while the human ships were still combat-ready. "Sir," the tactical officer said quietly, "recommend we withdraw to regroup." Hyun stared at the tactical display for a long moment. 6 months ago, he had conquered an entire star system in less than a day. Now he was being forced to retreat by a species that had been using starships for less than 2 centuries. "Signal the fleet," he ordered. "We're pulling back to the Vega system." But Vice Admiral Byung-Soo had no intention of letting them escape cleanly. "All ships pursue the enemy," he ordered. "Make them pay for every light year." The running battle continued for 3 more star systems. Every time the Vorthak tried to make a stand, the humans attacked with new tactics that defied conventional military logic. They used cargo ships as decoys, sent single fighters on suicide missions against enemy flagships, and turned retreat into attack so seamlessly that the Vorthak never knew what to expect next. By the time the Vorthak fleet finally escaped to their main base, they had lost more ships in 1 week than they had lost in the previous year of conquest. Commander Hyun stood in the ruins of his flagship's bridge and tried to compose a report for Vorthak High Command. "How do you explain to your superiors that humans don't fight like any other species in the galaxy? How do you describe an enemy that turns every military doctrine upside down and makes chaos into a weapon?" Finally, he settled on the simplest truth he could find. "High Command," he transmitted, "humanity is not like the other species we have conquered. They do not follow our rules of warfare. They do not break when they should break. They do not surrender when surrender is logical." He paused, looking at the empty stations where his officers had died fighting an enemy they didn't understand. Send reinforcements. Send everything we have, because if we do not stop them now, they will teach the rest of the galaxy that the Vorthak Empire can be defeated. The message reached Vorthak Prime 3 days later. Within hours, the Grand Fleet began mobilizing for the largest military operation in the Empire's history. The humans had won their first real victory. Soon, they would face their greatest test. High Commander Zethlock stood in the command center of the Vorthak Grand Fleet flagship Empire's Wrath, studying the tactical displays that showed the largest military force in galactic history. Around him stretched nearly 300 warships, including 24 dreadnoughts, 47 heavy cruisers, and the dreaded planetary bombardment platforms that had reduced 17 worlds to ash. "Sir," reported his aide, "all fleet elements report ready for hyperspace jump." Zethlock nodded grimly. The veteran commander had led the conquest of 11 species during his 40-year career. None of them had ever required the full might of the Grand Fleet, but then none of them had been human. "Set course for Proxima Centauri," he ordered. "It's time to end this human problem once and for all." 3 days later, the Grand Fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Proxima Centauri system. The sight that greeted them was both expected and surprising. The entire human colonial defense fleet was waiting in formation around Proxima. Centauri B Admiral Tae-hyun stood on the bridge of the flagship Soul's Light, watching the Vorthak Armada deploy with the calm of a man who had already accepted his fate. His fleet numbered 63 ships, every vessel that Earth and her colonies could spare. It was the largest human fleet ever assembled. It was also outnumbered 5-1. "Admiral," called Commodore Sunmi from the colonial ships, "the civilian population is requesting permission to join the fight." Tae-hyun looked at the tactical display showing dozens of mining ships, cargo haulers, and even passenger liners moving to join his battle line. Just like at Kepler 442, ordinary humans were volunteering to fight against impossible odds. "Permission granted," he said quietly. "Signal all civilian vessels. Welcome to the Colonial Defense Fleet." On the planet below, General Seok Jin watched the space battle preparations through his command bunker's periscope. His ground forces consisted of 20,000 professional soldiers and nearly 500,000 civilian volunteers. Every man, woman, and teenager capable of holding a weapon had refused evacuation. "Sir," reported Colonel Minho, "the Vorthak will probably begin orbital bombardment before attempting a landing." "Let them try," Seokjin replied. "We've got 3,000 underground shelters and enough supplies to last 2 years. They want this planet? They're going to have to dig us out person by person." The space battle began when High Commander Zethlock grew impatient with the human formation. "They're just sitting there," he told his tactical officer. "Are they planning to surrender?" "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the human flagship." Admiral Tae-hyun's weathered face appeared on the main screen. He looked tired but determined, like a man facing the end of everything he'd ever fought for. "High Commander Zethlock," the human said calmly, "I'm Admiral Tae-hyun of the Earth Navy. Before we begin killing each other, I thought you should know something about the system you're trying to conquer." Zethlock was curious despite himself. "Speak quickly, human." "Proxima Centauri B has been a human colony for 47 years, Tae-hyun said. 3 generations of my people have been born on that world. They've built farms, cities, schools, and families. This isn't just another star system to us, it's home. Your point?" Zethlock asked. Tae-hyun smiled sadly. "My point is that you're not just fighting the Colonial Defense Fleet today. You're fighting every human who ever looked up at the stars and dreamed of something better. You're fighting parents who want their children to grow up free. You're fighting farmers who planted crops they'll never harvest and teachers who wrote lessons they'll never teach." The human admiral paused. "High Commander, you've conquered 17 species, but I bet none of them ever fought you for their homes." The transmission ended and Zethlock stared at the blank screen for a moment. Then he shook his head and turned to his weapons officer. "Begin the attack," he ordered. "Show them what happens to dreamers who stand against the Empire." The battle that followed would be remembered as the largest space combat in galactic history. For the first 6 hours, it seemed like the Vorthak would achieve their usual quick victory. Human ships died by the dozens under the overwhelming firepower of the Grand Fleet. But something was different this time. The humans didn't break. Captain Kyung-soo of the battleship Gwangju's Revenge found himself surrounded by 6 Vorthak heavy cruisers after his escort ships were destroyed. His vessel was heavily damaged, his engines were dead, and half his crew was casualties. A normal captain would have surrendered. Instead, Kyung-soo ordered his remaining crew to switch to manual gunnery. "Sir," called Lieutenant Hwan from the weapons station, "we can't target accurately without computer assistance." "Then we'll get close enough that we can't miss," Kyung-soo replied. Using emergency thrusters, he maneuvered his crippled ship to point-blank range with the nearest Vorthak cruiser. For 6 hours, the Gwangju's Revenge fought with emergency power and manual weapons, holding off an entire enemy battle group through sheer determination and superior gunnery. On the planet's surface, the orbital bombardment had begun. Vorthak energy weapons turned entire city blocks into glass, but the humans had prepared for this. Deep underground, Sergeant Malsun led a squad of farmers and factory workers in preparing improvised explosives. "The Vorthak will have to land troops eventually," she told her squad. "When they do, we'll be ready." Her team included teacher Jung Min, factory worker Bo Young, and 17-year-old student Il Sung, whose parents had refused to let him evacuate. Sergeant Il Sung asked, "What if we can't stop them?" Malsun looked at the young man who should have been in school instead of preparing for war. "Then we make them pay such a high price that they never try this again." The turning point came on the 3rd day of battle. Admiral Tae-hyun's fleet had been reduced to 12 functional ships, but they were still fighting with undiminished fury. More importantly, the Vorthak losses were mounting faster than High Commander Zethlock had ever experienced. "Sir," his aide reported, "we've lost 97 ships. The humans have destroyed nearly a third of our fleet." Zethlock stared at the tactical display in disbelief. His overwhelming numerical advantage was disappearing ship by ship. The humans were losing vessels faster, but they were taking disproportionate numbers of Vorthak ships with them. "How is this possible?" he demanded. The answer came from an unexpected source. On the surface of Proxima Centauri B, Private Young-ho found himself the last survivor of his unit. Vorthak ground forces had overrun his position, but he was still alive in the ruins of a communication station. Instead of trying to escape, Young-ho did something that would become legend. He began transmitting detailed tactical information to the surviving human ships, giving them precise targeting data for orbital strikes against Vorthak landing zones. "Fleet Command, this is Private Young-ho," he transmitted calmly while enemy soldiers searched the rubble around him. "I have visual confirmation of Vorthak troop concentrations at coordinates 47.2 by 133.8. Request immediate orbital bombardment." "Young-ho," came Admiral Tae-hyun's voice. "You're in the blast radius. Move to safety." "Negative, sir," Young-ho replied. "I can see their entire deployment from here. This is the best targeting position in the sector." For 2 hours, Young-ho remained at his post, calling in precise strikes that devastated Vorthak ground forces. When enemy soldiers finally found his position, they discovered a young human who continued transmitting coordinates even as they raised their weapons. His final message was heard across the entire human fleet. "Tell my mother I died well. Tell the fleet where to aim." The precision strikes guided by Young-ho's sacrifice broke the Vorthak ground assault, but more than that, his willingness to die for accurate targeting data became a symbol of something that High Commander Zethlock was beginning to understand. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "the human ground forces are not breaking. Every position we overrun continues fighting. They're using their knowledge of the terrain to lead our troops into ambushes. And their fleet? Down to 8 ships, but they're still attacking. Admiral, I've never seen anything like this. They know they cannot win, but they refuse to stop fighting." Zethlock looked at the tactical display showing the devastation on both sides. He had achieved his objective. Human resistance was nearly broken. But his own fleet was so badly damaged that it would take years to rebuild. "Sir," another officer called, "we're receiving reports from our boarding parties." The reports were disturbing. Human crews were fighting deck by deck, room by room, making the Vorthak pay for every meter of their own ships. Even when overwhelmed, humans continued fighting with improvised weapons and desperate tactics that defied military logic. Most disturbing of all, the humans seemed to be getting stronger as the battle continued. Every loss made them fight harder. Every defeat made them more determined. High Commander Zethlock had conquered 17 species in his career. He had seen fear, desperation, and hopeless courage, but he had never seen anything like the look in the eyes of a human who had decided to never surrender. As the fourth day of battle began, he made a decision that would shock the entire Vorthak Empire. "Signal the fleet," he ordered quietly. "We're withdrawing, sir," his aide asked in disbelief. "We're withdrawing," Zethlock repeated. "Send word to Vorthak Prime. Tell them that humans are not like other species." High Commander Zethlock stood in the ruins of his flagship's command center, staring at tactical displays that told a story he had never expected to see. His grand fleet, the largest military force in Vorthak history, was retreating from a human star system after suffering 60% casualties. "Sir," his aide reported quietly, "the 47th Attack Wing is requesting immediate withdrawal. They've lost 80% of their fighters to human defenders who are flying damaged ships into our formations." Zethlock nodded grimly. In 40 years of conquest, he had never seen anything like human tactics. When their weapons failed, they used their ships as weapons. When their ships were destroyed, they used the wreckage as weapons. When they had nothing left, they used themselves as weapons. "What is the status of our ground forces?" he asked. "Requesting evacuation, sir," came the reluctant reply. "The human population refuses to surrender. Every building we capture becomes a fortress. Every civilian we encounter is armed and hostile." On the surface of Proxima Centauri B, Private Young-Ho had been dead for 6 hours, but his sacrifice continued to guide human resistance. The targeting data he had provided with his life allowed the surviving human ships to strike Vorthak ground forces with devastating accuracy. Colonel Aisha crouched in the ruins of New Seoul's city center, watching Vorthak troop carriers land 3 blocks away. Her Marine battalion had been reduced to 47 soldiers, but they were about to attempt something that would become military legend. "Listen up," she told her Marines, including Sergeant Daeho and Corporal Sungmin. "Those ships over there contain the command staff for their entire ground operation. We're going to take them." "Ma'am," Sergeant Daeho said carefully, "that's a full Vorthak battle group. We're outnumbered 50 to 1. "Yes," Acha replied with a cold smile, "so they won't expect us to attack." What followed was the most audacious military operation in human history. 47 Marines armed with improvised weapons and desperate courage launched a direct assault on the heart of the Vorthak ground forces. They moved through the ruins like ghosts, using their knowledge of the destroyed city to approach the enemy from impossible angles. Corporal Sungmin led a team through the old subway tunnels, emerging directly beneath the Vorthak command post. "Sergeant." Daeho's squad used building-to-building movement to set up crossfire positions that turned the enemy's numerical advantage against them. But it was Colonel Acha herself who achieved the impossible. Fighting her way through 3 levels of Vorthak defenders, she reached the command deck of their flagship and confronted High Commander Zethlock himself. The 2 warriors faced each other across the smoking ruins of the alien ship's bridge. Zethlock stood nearly 8 feet tall, armed with advanced energy weapons and protected by powered armor. Acha was a human woman with a damaged rifle and burns covering half her body. "Surrender, human," Zethlock said, his mechanical translator conveying resignation rather than menace. "You have fought well, but this battle is over." Acha raised her weapon despite the obvious futility of the gesture. "High Commander, you still don't understand humans, do you?" "Explain," Zethlock said, genuinely curious. "We don't fight because we think we can win," she replied. "We fight because it's right. We fight because this is our home. We fight because the alternative is to live on our knees, and humans would rather die on their feet." Zethlock studied the small human warrior for a long moment. Around them, the sounds of battle continued as her Marines fought against overwhelming odds with the same desperate determination she was showing. "Your people are dying for nothing," he said. "Even if you kill me, my fleet will glass this planet from orbit." "Maybe," Acha agreed. "But every human who dies here sends a message to every other species in the galaxy. That message is simple. The Vorthak Empire can be fought. They can be hurt. They can be stopped." She took a step closer, her weapon trained on the alien commander. "High Commander, you've conquered 17 species. But here's what you learned today. You'll never conquer the 18th. The confrontation ended when Sergeant Daeho and his squad finally fought their way to the command deck. The Marines found their colonel facing down the most powerful military leader in Vorthak history with nothing but a damaged rifle and unbreakable human, determination. But the real shock came when Zethlock slowly raised his hands in surrender. "I yield," the High Commander said, his voice carrying across the ship's communication system. "All Vorthak forces cease fire and withdraw to the fleet." Sergeant Deho stared in disbelief. "Ma'am, he's surrendering?" Colonel Acha kept her weapon trained on Zethlock while she tried to understand what had just happened. "Why?" she asked. The High Commander looked at the human Marines around him, wounded, outnumbered, but still ready to fight to the death. "Because," he said quietly, "I finally understand what your diplomat tried to tell us at Nexus Prime. You can make humans bleed, but you cannot make them break." He activated his communication system and addressed his entire fleet. "This is High Commander Zethlock. All forces are to withdraw immediately from human space. The conquest of the system is cancelled." The Vorthak retreat began within hours. As alien ships lifted off from Proxima Centauri B's surface, human survivors emerged from hiding to watch their enemies leave. The cost had been terrible. More than half the human population was dead or wounded, and the planet's infrastructure was devastated. But they had won. Admiral Tae-hyun stood on the bridge of his battered flagship, watching the last Vorthak vessels disappear into hyperspace. Around him, the space above Proxima Centauri B was filled with debris from the largest space battle in galactic history. "Admiral," called his communications officer, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth." The main screen flickered to life, showing the familiar face of Representative Kang Woo. The diplomat looked older than he had at the Nexus Prime conference, aged by months of watching his species fight for survival. "Admiral Tae-hyun," Kang Woo said, "I've just received word from the Galactic Council. The Vorthak Empire has requested an immediate ceasefire and peace negotiations." Tae-hyun nodded grimly. "What are the terms?" "Full recognition of human territorial claims, withdrawal of all Vorthak forces from human space, and a non-aggression pact." Kang Woo paused. High Commander Zethlock specifically requested that the negotiations be held on neutral ground, with full diplomatic immunity for all participants. "They're afraid of us," Tae-hyun realized. "No," Kang Woo corrected. "They respect us. There's a difference." 6 months later, Representative Kang Woo stood once again in the Great Hall of Nexus Prime Station, but this time the atmosphere was very different. The alien delegates who had once viewed humans as primitive newcomers now watched them with wary respect. High Commander Zethlock, now serving as the Vorthak Empire's chief peace negotiator, approached the human delegation with something that might have been humility. "Representative Kang Woo," the alien leader said, "I owe you an apology. At our last meeting, I called your people primitives. I was wrong." Kang Woo nodded politely. "High Commander, no apology is necessary. You learned the truth about humanity the same way every enemy eventually learns it, through experience." "What will happen now?" asked Ambassador Thrix, the crystalline Zilani diplomat who had witnessed both conferences. Kang Woo looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives of dozens of species. "Now, Ambassador Thrix, the galaxy knows something important. It knows that not every species can be conquered. Some peoples will fight for their freedom no matter the cost." He turned to address the entire assembly. "The Vorthak Empire spent centuries conquering species who fought until defeat became inevitable, then surrendered to preserve their lives. But humans are different. We fight until victory becomes inevitable or until we're all dead. Defeat is not in our vocabulary." High Commander Zethlock stepped forward. "The Vorthak Empire formally recognizes human territorial sovereignty and pledges non-interference in human affairs. We have learned that some battles are too costly to win. More than that," added Ambassador Thrix, "other species have taken note. The Krellian hegemony has withdrawn their territorial claims against the Alteran Republic. The Nexus Trade Federation is negotiating fair commerce agreements instead of demanding tribute. The balance of power in the galaxy has shifted." Kang Woo smiled. "The universe is a big place with room for many different kinds of people. Some species choose to conquer. Others choose to trade. Some prefer isolation. Humans choose freedom, for ourselves and for anyone else who wants it." He looked directly at Zethlock. "High Commander, your empire can continue to exist and prosper, but it will do so by earning respect, not by demanding submission. The age of easy conquest is over." As the conference concluded and the delegates began to file out, Ambassador Thrix approached Kang Woo one final time. Representative, the crystalline being said, "How did you know? How did you know that humans would fight so hard?" Kang Wu gathered his papers and prepared to return to Earth, where reconstruction efforts were already beginning on the devastated colony worlds. "Ambassador Thrix, I told you at our first meeting. My grandfather fought in a war against impossible odds, and he never surrendered. Captain Sora held Kepler 442 for 18 hours with a single destroyer.